Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Wait, microphone necessary? Can you hear me out there? No. Okay, microphone necessary. Okay, so it's, there you go. So as Alan told you, I am a chef who have been working really consciously in communities and with institutions to overhaul their food systems. It is funny, this sort of landed in my lap a little bit, but the minute I heard that there was a hospital excited about making change to their food, I jumped. I jumped because I would love to take this on and figure this out because, as we all know, hospital food is a bit of a chronic disaster. So what I'm going to do today is tell you a little bit about some of the things that have happened both in hospitals and in universities. And some of the things I've learned. There's lots of different ways to approach this, so is there time for discussion after this one, or are we going to roll right in? A little bit, okay. And of course, as we're cruising around to this day, I'd be very happy to chat with all of you. So here we are. One of the things that I am learning since leaving Ryerson is that when we talk about this issue of rethinking our food systems and institutions, we have to really think about beyond the plates, right? For sure, the first step is to put better food on the plates, and that's no question. But the issue about food in institutions is not just that we haven't been buying from the right places and that we haven't been using the right recipes. The issue is the level of priority that food gets in the institution. It's the culture, it's the entire sort of experience and the way food lives in a place, right? Unfortunately, in institutions, food is generally considered a bit of an irritating necessity. And so it mostly just gets outsourced to the lowest bidder, and everybody thinks that they're doing a really nice job. So what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about culture and about food cultures, because I think that sort of, hopefully, it will resonate with the work that all of you are doing here in Nova Scotia, because it seems as though there's an opportunity to really think about your provincial food culture, right? And how food lives and breathes. I've heard from so many of you about frustrations about the disconnect between the fact that you live in this amazingly beautiful place with so many gorgeous farms producing wonderful food, but somehow those good food connections are not making it to the places that count, right? And I think that food culture is a really important part of all of that. So, here we go. Right? Whoa, we went the wrong way. Okay, so I've got two definitions that I found here about what is food culture. So this first one suggests food culture is the connection to food in a pure and deep sense. It is the conversation had around a table 3 times a day, and it is the health given to our bodies from the plants and animals we consume. It's really sort of broad, holistic understanding. Here's another, again, wrong way. Here's another thing to consider, and that is food culture refers to the practices, attitudes, and beliefs, as well as the networks and institutions surrounding the production, distribution, and consumption of food. It's everything up until including the eating, right? But it really emphasizes the fact that this is about more than just eating. This is about our relationship with food, individually and collectively. I'll get this right at some point. So what we know for sure is that food culture is about much more than the food on our plates. It's about the way food lives and breathes in our communities and the priority we give food in our lives. So this is a quote from Briette Severin, which is very this is actually the quote that is played at the beginning of the Japanese Iron Chef. But I like the message that it sends, right? Tell me what you eat and I will tell you what you are. Just the important message here for me is the fact that we are mirrors. Who we are our mirror. What we eat is a real reflection of who we are and what we're all about. And I think that's really where the beautiful cultural connections come. And to me, I like to travel. And whenever I travel, the first thing I do is drop my bags and go find something to eat, right? And wherever it is that I am. That's how you get to know people and a place, right? So, how do we rebuild a food culture? This is the world according to me, but in my opinion, this process starts by revaluing all of the hands involved in moving food from field to kitchen to table. I think that culture gets extinguished when we think about automation and processing, and the sort of industrial food system really kills our culture because it has decided that paying human beings to do this work is too much money. but the human connection is really the point, right? So this is a little diagram that I put together about what I think good food culture looks like. So there are more words required here, but in my opinion, good food culture involves access, free, unrestricted access to community cooking, community meals, eating together, farms and gardens, of course, the source of the food, and then celebrating with food. I think that of course, there's much more. This is a very simplistic version of this, but I think that you get what I mean, what I'm trying to say here about the fact that there's a cycle, and there's a broader sort of scope around a culture that includes a few really key elements. So, what are the impacts of this? I'm on the Toronto Food Policy Council, and one of the biggest lessons that I've learned from that community is the fact that good food policy equals good everything else policy. By nature, right? If you have good food policy, it automatically means you have good agriculture policy, good health policy, good trade policy, all these kinds of things. And so really, the way we understood the way our cities were organized, the way civilizations were built, primarily was about access to food, right? So if you focus on food and do it well, sustainably, everything else will generally fall into place. And that is incredibly encouraging. There is a leap of faith required for that a lot of politicians aren't really that excited about. But I really do think it's the truth. And so a lot of the work that I do tries to encourage this understanding that you just need to sort of trust and invest in food. And that the other way around, that divesting in food and really dismissing food has ripple effects that will impact all of those other areas as well, right? That's the sort of other side of the coin. Okay, so I'm going to go through a bunch of impacts, and I've got stories from both hospital and university life here. So this is now impacts that I've seen for real in the work that I've done probably in the past 5 or 6 years. First up, there's an economic impact. This is a newspaper piece from a bakery. So short end of this longer story is that at Ryerson we had a catering business on campus, much like the one that made us lunch today. And there are trays of cookies. We did thousands and thousands of plates of fruit and cookies that would go out to various meetings. But the cookies were these huge, really synthetic things that were underbaked to suggest that they were chewy. They were just kind of gross. And everybody would break them in half, right? And not eat the whole thing, but nobody's gonna take that half, right? So that was just considered a wasted cookie. So I called the supplier and I said, can you make me a smaller cookie? I have 66 cents to spend, make me a smaller cookie. And they were like, oh, the machine doesn't really work, it only works in one way, I can't really change it. And I was like, I'm buying thousands of cookies from you, please. They said no. I didn't understand, it made no sense. So I called a friend of mine who has a bakery at Gerrard and Broadview, and I said, I have 66 cents, can you make me a 3-inch cookie with the best ingredients you can get your hands on? She was in a bit of disbelief that this was a real question that I was asking. And she said, of course I can. And so she came in and brought me some samples, and they were gorgeous, and she's using local grains and Chocolate Soul, which is a beautiful horizontally traded chocolate company in Toronto. So she's using all those great ingredients. And so our first order was 500 cookies for the week. By the time I left Ryerson in December, we were ordering 1,000 cookies a week. And for convocation, when we had students and all their parents, we ordered 16,000 cookies from her. And it was the best because on social media, she would send us these photos of like her son and her son's girlfriend scooping dough, and everybody sort of madly putting these orders in these boxes and boxes, which is joyful, right? I'm so much happier to give her that money than for it to go to some random home office in Ohio for people who don't really care about what we're doing anyway, you know? So anyhow, this was the excitement of this relationship, and about the fact that a tiny little tweak can have an institution really thoughtfully invested in local small business. And of course, the ripple effect of the fact that the orders for local grains boosted, the orders for the chocolate boosted, and everybody felt a little touch from all of this, right? Next up is labor. So of course, because I wanted to put more local food into these institutions, that by default meant more raw ingredients and more whole ingredients because the processing has not caught up, right? So my staff had to start chopping onions and peeling potatoes and doing all of this kind of stuff. And as I'm sure most of you know, a lot of the staff that work in these contexts are union staff who've been at it for about 25 years, but I discovered they don't really know how to chop an onion, right? Which is sort of insane because they've just been cutting vac sealed bags open and heating things up. So we supported the team, right? And we did it as enthusiastically and positively as we could, right? Because a lot of these folks were 5 years away from retirement, and I walk in asking them to do their job completely differently, and they were like, yeah, right, lady. Are you kidding me? And they held out, digging their heels in, hoping that I would soon pack my knives and get out of there, right? But some of them really got it, and bless their hearts, right? They really threw themselves into it. And of course, agricultural impact. This is the new farm in Creemore in Ontario. They grow beautiful salad greens, which is what these rows are. But when I started working in hospitals, I completely was blown away by the idea of the farmer to patient relationship. I didn't, until farmers said, they were like, are you actually serious? You're really gonna serve this food? Finally, someone is gonna serve my food to a hospital patient. They were amazed, and even said things like these folks here, that on a smaller, more localized level, there were a few inputs that they could offer to a section of crops to really boost the nutrition. Potentially cost prohibitive for their entire field, but if they knew that there were certain amounts of crops that were going to sick patients in a hospital, there were things that they could do, which then started my head spinning with ideas about what's possible. So we dreamed up this idea, and this sign did exist, right? It was a real thing. And we were thrilled about the fact that connection between the farm and the institution could be made this beautifully. Next up was the menu. We started eating with the seasons. So these strawberries were the first move that I made on a hospital tray. And we had to work with the dietitians to figure out exactly how many strawberries. Then we had a big debate about whether the tops had to stay on or come off. I thought they were cute and their little handle for delivery. They thought they were a choking hazard. So we debated this, but I got them on there. The best thing about this story is that you can see a hallways of refrigerated space behind Hung. This is Hung, the receiver. And when these came in, I said, Hung, please put them in the produce fridge. And he gave me this look on his face. And I didn't understand it. And then I was like, oh, Hung, there is no produce fridge, is there? He's like, no. We had 4 or 5 giant walk-in refrigerators, not one with any produce in it, right? So I got a piece of tape, and I wrote on the tape, produce, stuck it on the door, and I was like, now we have a produce fridge. But it was just the things that you encounter, right? And everybody was thrilled about this beautiful taste of these gorgeous strawberries. So in the hospitals, this is a tray of one day when I cooked a completely scratch-made, locally sourced meal, and it was in February. So you can see roast turkey, there's a beet and potato salad, there's some pickled vegetables, up top is a bit of a mushroom consomme, and then an apple and cherry crumble. And then to the left, you'll see a note from the kitchen, and there's a picture of a chef, Rod Bowers, who's a pal of mine. He came in to cook, so he wrote a little, hope you enjoy this food and get well soon, note to the patients. But the point of this is the whole package that you deliver, right? The plate looks great, and it's exciting, and it's colorful, but there's also the importance of knowing that there's a human being in the kitchen downstairs who's thinking about you, who's cooking with you and your health in mind, right? This is how we sort of nurture a better, more rich culture. Programming. So other spaces in the hospital started to change. I also did a project at Sick Kids in Toronto. So we developed a brand called Kids Eat Local. And that was sort of the signifier of our programming. And so we had a local food expo in the atrium. And really that was just us sampling things. Really, that was pretty much it. But really, the farmer who I bought stuff from gave me this little bag of tiny carrots. And those of you who have eaten those know that they are sweet and beautiful, and that you just pop them in your mouth. So I just put the bag on the table, and people were like, can I really eat this? I said, yeah, just go for it. And they're like, is it washed? I was like, come on, just go for it. They're like, shouldn't we peel these? I was like, you're gonna peel it and have nothing left. Just eat this thing. But I had to like hug them and hold them and be like, you can do this. And then they'd eat it and I'd see their eyes light up and it's like, this is extraordinary to think that you are like a brain surgeon and you're freaking out about eating this little carrot, right? So anyhow, lots of opportunities. The other bit was about fun, right? The Disney princesses are awesome, but I thought this would be a little bit more interesting, right? And this is the propaganda for the revolution, right? This is, that's the way I understand that. Let's get them while they're in hospital beds. But it was so much nicer for me to see the walls covered with these things colored in than some random weird commercial Disney thing, right? And then this was one of the things I was most excited about. I really wanted to show that food was important and that we took it really seriously. So we decided to format all the recipes that we gave out to look like prescriptions. And as you can see at the bottom it says, what does it say? Or at the top it says, enjoy as needed for good health. Just keep going, right? And the people got it. They understood the message, right? They started making the connection. And this is the way we say at the Scarborough Hospital, this is how we feel about food, and this is how we feel about medicine. And then here, when I went to buy food for the local food expo, I bought it at the farmer's market from my friend Vicky, who's a farmer in Prince Edward County, and she said, who should I make this invoice out to? And I said, oh, Sick Kids Hospital. And we both paused for a moment. I was like, is that the first time you've ever written a hospital's name on your invoice list? And we had this happy celebration. But for me, these are little bits of evidence of change, right? When we have farmers invoicing hospitals for food, that lets you know that different things are happening. And like it says here, that some deeper connections are being made, while still doing a wonderful job of serving patients. So now I think we're flipping over to University Land. Right, so here, these are all photos of our to-go food. These are the grab-and-go quick bits. Everything was under $5, but it was important that we prove that you can, in fact, serve delicious, beautiful, fresh food. It doesn't have to cost a lot, and students are busy, right? They're all like, I'm too busy to do anything else besides what they're doing. So we met them where they were. And we produced really lovely food. Didn't cost a lot, that was delicious, and that was honest. You know what I mean? It was really good stuff that filled the tank while they were running around. Other things we did was special events to celebrate with good food. And so this was all beautifully frozen food. This I think happened in January. But we had a bunch of amazing frozen Ontario fruit, which was perfect for smoothies, right? Now that I see this bunch of rhubarb, I guess it's clearly spring, right? I guess this is clearly a spring bit. But everybody really dug it. They loved it. And it just shows that you just have to do a bit of thinking and be a bit creative and really want it. And you can make it happen. It didn't cost a lot. We put up some signs, people got excited about it, and then everybody had amazing, beautiful smoothies. The other bit, on a university campus, you got a lot of stressed out people. So we decided to use the food as a vehicle for some messaging, both for their health as well as just a bit of encouragement. So we would give them a really sort of legitimate health tip, but then you can see the hashtags at the bottom are about exam periods and a bit of encouragement. And we tell our frontline staff would say, hang in there, you're gonna do this, or they knew that they liked a little extra hot sauce on something, or that they, you know what I mean? And now is the time for the full force of love to get out there and to really take care of students and to use food and the culture around food to nurture them and to support what was happening. We did start making more chicken noodle soup and putting more garlic and things to help boost immunity. And we also had like dirty mac and cheese for those moments when they just had to do, you know what I mean? This is what they needed, fine. But we would, some of the little tips were about things like eating beets, and then the idea was that they would see that on their cup, and that they would go into the cafeteria and see a beet salad or other beet dishes, so that those connections are really made well. We also wanted to connect people to growing. So this is our quarter-acre farm on the rooftop of the engineering building. It's a few steps away from Yonge and Dundas Square, which is, I think, one of the busiest intersections in the continent. Last year, in 2015, we grew 8,000 pounds of organic produce on that rooftop. And it was an amazing thing for students to be engaged in, as you can see here. This is our weekly volunteer session with students, and they loved it, right? Even just standing there, getting a different perspective on the city and on campus, getting a breath of good air in, and then heading back to wherever it is you're going to do with your day. But it was really important for us that we were able to grow this much food and really make these connections around the priority that we hold around food. Of course, we promoted the locally grown food, so the food from the roof was sold at our weekly farmers market. And this is the farmers market stall, really boasting and screaming as loudly as we could about food that was grown right on campus. And perhaps most important, we shared food together. So this is a photo from one of our seasonal community meals. Every season we'd have a meal. It was a pay-what-you-can meal. It was always locally sourced. It was always seasonal. And it was almost always vegetarian, because that's how we made the pay-what-you-can magic work there. And it was well attended. We got upwards of 200, 250 people, staff, students, and faculty, who just, the point was for one moment to take a break, put your phone down, sit at a table, and eat a meal. And it sent a great message to the campus about what we feel about food and how seriously we take it, you know? So, the excitement here is that this is possible. Our culture is about our identity, and our food tells the story of who we are. So, ask yourself, what do your food choices say about you? And I'm going to leave you hanging with this question, and I think maybe that'll sort of be the thing that informs the rest of these couple of days that we have together to really think about what the food culture, specifically here in Nova Scotia, says about who we are, and how, right now, I'm sensing from the conversations I have with all of you that there's space and there's a gap that needs to be bridged. So hopefully in our conversations through the next couple of days, we can come up with some really interesting ideas or ways to bring those two things closer together. Thank you very much. What do you think, Linda? How's our time? I'm not good at staying within the parameters that you gave me.
Two or three questions
okay.
now, and then more of the general conversation.
Wonderful.
Although you may have answered all the questions.
I know, right? Maybe.
What was the cost of that mushroom consomme meal?
So the meal itself, I believe it was about $2.16, which, more important, was only 33 cents more per patient than what we were already spending. Right? And my argument with hospital food is that it's an incremental investment required for an exponential impact. Right? A tiny bit of input for a completely overhauled experience.
Probably no waste or less.
Right?
No waste.
Exactly. Exactly. Please, yes.
The garden,
Yes.
the top garden, did you use those vegetables in the cafeteria?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, so we went through the market and then went through a CSA, and I made him a deal that said I would just buy everything else. And so because we had chefs in the kitchen, my direction to them was make it work. Figure it out. Whatever they have to sell, you buy and you cook and make it delicious. Yeah. Yes, right.
You said that was on the engineering building.
Yes.
Can you do that on most buildings, or do you have to re-engineer the building?
No, well, it all depends on when the building was built, right? There were some questions about capacity, but of course we did a feasibility study and we got a green light from the engineers, hilariously. But I still wasn't sure, so I told our team to slow down on growing squash and pumpkins, and right? I was like, give me green leafy things. Let's do lots of leafy things, just to be sure about it. But most buildings stay built in the 90s and forward are strong enough. And what we're also learning on other buildings is that the retrofit is not as onerous as they may have thought that it would be. Yes, Frank?
Quick question. So what, in terms of the hospital and the university, Where were the barriers? Were there attitudes? Was it economic? Was it regulatory? What was stopping them?
All of those things. Attitudes for sure, just straight change making was a giant effort. Economics was a big deal because everybody had it in their head that my local food was going to be way too expensive and that we shouldn't even bother going down the road because they knew that it would cost so much more. Every roadblock that could exist, purchasing was the hugest, right? Getting people to do things differently, to go off their script, and to cut checks quicker. Because family farms, now that we were buying from family farms, they can't wait 90 to 120 days to get paid. I was very emphatic about the fact that everybody got a check in 30 days, right? Because it's not going to work otherwise. So those roadblocks for sure. And my loudmouth stubbornness was sometimes the only way that we got through. Yes?
So I'm trying to understand, so if you're at a hospital in a rural area, for example, how do you, what are the barriers in terms of legislation? This is all stuff I don't understand.
Yeah.
What are the things that might prevent you from getting food from a local farmer? So there must be certain regulations and stuff.
Yep, it's twofold. One is it depends on whether or not you're using a third-party operator, right? Like Chartwell's or Sodexo or Aramark, because you're bound by their purchasing structure. So when we think about Chartwell's, because they're the team that I worked with at Ryerson, we were bound by their purchasing, and they are under the umbrella of Compass Group Canada. And to be a vendor, an approved supplier for Compass Group Canada, you need to be able to satisfy contracts from British Columbia to Nova Scotia, which completely eliminates all small regional producers, right? So I had to fight for special expediting, just for the purposes of my little contract at Ryerson, for them to open this up, to be able to actually buy from. And like, this by far the biggest roadblock is this, and reworking the processing. The other piece is the fact that a lot of small producers don't have HACCP certification, right? Which is about the traceability and holding at every point of the food process. So if it's cheese, how the milk's held, how long, where, so that there's due diligence, which is fair and necessary, but HACCP certification itself is quite expensive. And so when I was at Sick Kids, I pulled the infection control people and all of the right people to the table to say, what are the criteria that you want satisfied by your suppliers? And then we can see if the folks that I want to do business with are in fact playing along. The stupidity of it all was the fact that they had not asserted their own idea about this. So they couldn't tell me. They just kept pointing at HACCP, right? They hadn't really invested in figuring out where their lines were on all of this. So we've uncovered lots of opportunity, let's say that. So I think we have to move, yes?
Yes, I think.
Okay, but for sure, I'd be very happy to continue this conversation. Thanks, everyone.